Welcome villagers, to the village hidden in the stories. I'm your guide, All Kage, the creator and author of all the what-if stories you see on this channel, with your awesome suggestions, of course. I write, edit, and produce every story you hear, so if you're wondering who made it, it's me. I hope you enjoy today's video. Be sure to leave your what-if ideas in the comments and subscribe if you're new. Today's story is What If Naruto Was in Steven Universe Part 1, and I hope you like it because this part and Part 2 are considered Halloween specials with how long they are. On that note, please comment what you guys gonna be for Halloween. I'm back again, hopefully for good. And this took so long to make, so please blow this up. That way we don't have to stop at Part 1 and 2, before we dive in, shout out time. Thanks so much to everyone who comments, keep them coming. And our second shout-outs for my Shinobi Patreon members, a special thanks to him, Francios Lyman. I went off for a while so it's understandable why we only have INE Shinobi right now. Still a big thanks to him for staying. If you'd like to support the channel, check out my Patreon, link in the description. Now, without further ado, let's jump into this what if. Part 1, Agent's Mission. The beach shook with a boom. The impact of three figures hitting the earth kicked up a sand plume that stretched as tall and wide as a house. Compared to the rest of the beach, though, it was a small scar, just another mark on a place used to chaos. The sand rose fast and fell faster, clearing to reveal the trio standing together, for the most part. To anyone else, they probably looked like heroes, a tight-knit team bathed in sunlight, ready to save the day. Yeah, Amethyst said under her breath. That's what most people would think. She skidded back sitting on the sandy beach, the hem of her black tank shifting as she sat back up. The salty breeze tugged at her messy lavender hair, strands sticking to her cheek as she looked blankly, eyes soft, kinda annoyed, but waiting. Garnet stood to her left, calm as ever, tall, steady, and framed by that impossible confidence that made it seem like nothing could touch her. The red of her gauntlets gleamed in the sun, her shades hiding whatever future thoughts were flickering behind them. Pearl was the opposite, tight posture, spear already drawn, looking like she'd mapped out 50 different ways to win and hated all of them. Even now, her blue-white glow felt too clean for this messy beach. As stuck up as usual. Amethyst rolled her shoulders, feeling the tension buzz between them. Before she could make a move, Steven, in his usual red shirt with the yellow star, came sliding across the sand on a boogie board, like he'd just been smacked out of the air. Without missing a beat, Pearl turned toward him. "Are you okay, Steven?" the lanky gem asked, worry clear in her tone. Steven blinked up from his board, dazed but still trying to smile. "I've seen better days." "Pearl, I've got a boo-boo," Amethyst called, half joking. Her side ached from that last hit, but she played it off. "Walk it off," Pearl shot back, her voice sharp. Of course she'd say that. "Calm yourselves," Garnet came in, tone even as ever. "It's coming back." Amethyst turned her eyes forward, the wind starting to pick up again, sand flying everywhere, stinging her face. Through the mess, she saw it. The same puffer fish gem monster they'd been fighting for hours. Giant, round, a weird mix of green and pink split down the middle. Its body was covered in spikes, and it puffed itself up with a nasty hiss before blowing out a torrent of air strong enough to shake the beach. Even Garnet had to brace herself this time. "God, I hate monsters like this," Amethyst muttered, shielding her face. Garnet was the first to move. "You too distracted," she said simply before jumping high, vanishing into the sky. Pearl gave a quick nod, turning to Amethyst and Steven. "All right, let's show this thing what we're made of." Amethyst rolled her eyes. "What do you think we've been doing for the past hour?" She was getting tired of this. The thing wouldn't stay down, and honestly, this fight was starting to drag. The wind slowed, the monster deflating slightly. Pearl raised her spear and hurled it at the creature. But the pufferfish sucked in another huge breath, blasting the air back out with a high-pitched wail. The gust was so strong it knocked the spear off course, spinning it right back toward them. "Duck!" Pearl shouted, dropping to the ground. "I don't see any," Amethyst started, but quickly dropped low as the spear zipped past her. She sighed, then glanced at Steven, who had raised his boogie board like a shield. "Steven's turn," he said proudly, grinning wide before tossing the board with surprising skill. The board sailed through the air with confidence, then thunked uselessly against one of the monster's spikes, wedging itself there like a bad dart throw. Steven froze, blinked once, then shrugged with that sheepish grin of his. "Okay, maybe it's more of a land move." Amethyst couldn't help but snort, "Nice try dude, don't sweat it, Garnet's already got this." Her eyes lifted just in time to catch Garnet's silhouette cutting through the sunlight above them. The gem was descending fast, arms pulled back, gauntlets glowing with heat and pressure. She grit her teeth, fist cocked. Every ounce of her weight driving into the drop. For a second, the world slowed, the air between them rippled. The puffer gem sucked in another breath, the wind pulling against Garnet's strike, sand spiraling around her. "Come on, close it," Amethyst thought, her hands twitching at her sides. But Garnet wasn't getting through, the air pressure pushed against her like a wall, her gauntlet trembling mid-swing. Then, boom! The beach exploded in sound and sand, a blinding flash swallowed the view as the impact wave tore across the boardwalk. Amethyst threw an arm over her eyes, the ground rumbling under her feet. When the air finally cleared, Garnet was down, sent tumbling across the sand. Sliding until she crashed near Pearl and Steven. "Garnet," Pearl shouted, rushing over. Steven stumbled back, wide-eyed but still trying to see through the haze. Amethyst just stood there for a second, blinking through the settling dust. Her chest tightened, not fear, exactly, but that weird gut drop she only got when something wasn't right. She'd seen Garnet get hit before. Never like that. The air dropped in a hush, a heavy pause that hung over the beach like the world itself was holding its breath. Even the waves seemed quieter, leaving only the distant hiss of settling sand and the faint ringing in their ears. Amethyst blinked through the dust, the blast had thrown Garnet clean across the sand. And where the puffer gem once floated, there was only a swirling cloud of grit and glittering debris. She swallowed, staring. No way that thing's still alive, right? But something was there, something that wasn't the monster. Finally, the dust began to thin, pulled apart by the sea breeze, and what stood in the center of the crater made Amethyst's stomach twist. A figure. Human. Or, close enough. He stood tall, about Pearl's height, dressed in pitch black from collar to shoes, a silk cloak fluttering faintly behind him, the hem singed at the edges. His white mask caught the sunlight, smooth and blank except for faint cracks around the eyes. Spiky blonde hair spilled out past his shoulders, catching every ray like firelight. He held the monster's gem in one hand, just held it, like it weighed nothing, his arm extended as though the fight had been nothing more than a passing chore. Amethyst's brow furrowed, he's human, but how? From where she stood, she could see the crater's scorched edges. Whatever that hit was, it wasn't luck, it was power, real power. The kind that poofed gems and sent Garnet flying. And he wasn't even looking at them. Just staring down at the gem in his palm like it didn't matter. "Who is this guy?" Amethyst finally said, voice breaking the silence. Pearl turned, still kneeling beside Garnet, eyes narrowed. "I didn't even see him before Garnet was knocked away." "Did he, poof the puffer fish?" "He did," Garnet answered, already pushing herself to her feet. Her shades glinted as she faced the stranger. "He struck from behind. The force was enough to throw me off balance." She paused, her tone darkening. "But I feel like there's more we're not seeing." Amethyst shivered a little at that. Garnet's voice didn't waver, but there was something in it, something uncertain. And that was never good. Garnet didn't do uncertainty. "I thought you guys were the only ones that could poof monsters," Steven said, half in awe, half confusion. "Not only us, Steven," Pearl answered, slipping into her lecturing tone, though her eyes never left the masked figure. "It's about delivering enough force to disrupt a monster's form, but," she frowned. "Humans don't have that kind of power." Stephen looked between them. Could they be a crystal gem then? Pearl hesitated, and that hesitation said enough. Possible, but unlikely. They're breathing, I can see the vapor when the light hits it. Gems don't breathe. Her voice dropped lower, more troubled. So if they are human, that raises a lot of questions. It doesn't matter if he's human or gem, Garnet said firmly, stepping forward, sand crunching under her boots. He took out the monster with one blow, and he hasn't moved since. Her hands flexed, gauntlets shimmering into existence with a low hum. Something's very wrong. She didn't have to say the rest. Amethyst felt it too, the tension in her gut, the way the hairs on her arms stood on end. She cracked her knuckles, summoning her whip, while Pearl adjusted her stance beside her, spear flickering into her hand with practiced grace. Stephen froze, eyes wide as Garnet gave the quiet order. Stephen, get behind us. Amethyst smirked faintly, masking her nerves. Yeah, whoever this guy is, he's not just some random dude. The masked man didn't move for a long moment. Only the faint breeze off the ocean stirred his cloak. Then, finally, Garnet's voice cut through the silence, steady, controlled, but firm enough to command the whole beach. You there, she called out, her tone carrying easily across the still air. The man turned almost immediately, like he'd been waiting for her to speak. That alone made Amethyst's stomach tighten. The way he moved, slow, deliberate, like he already knew what they were going to say. Who are you? Garnet continued, her stance solid, unshifting. Where did you come from, and what do you plan on doing with that gem in your hand? For a long second, he didn't answer. Just stood there, head tilted slightly, the cracked white mask catching the fading sunlight. Amethyst couldn't tell if he was sizing them up, or just didn't care. Then his voice came, low and steady. Who I am. And what I plan on doing, is none of your business. Amethyst frowned. That was rude, she muttered under her breath. Seriously, who starts a conversation like that? Pearl stiffened beside her, jaw tightening as she stepped forward, spear half-formed in her hand. No matter what your intentions are, we cannot allow you to keep that gem, she said, tone calm but cutting. Garnet's gaze stayed locked on him. You're human, correct? The man hesitated for half a heartbeat before replying, yes, I'm human. Something in the way he said it made Amethyst's hair prickle, too flat, too careful. Like the words were just something he'd practiced saying. Garnet eased her stance a little, lowering her arms but keeping her fists charged. Then you should hand over the gem, she said evenly. It's dangerous for humans, you could get yourself hurt. He turned slightly, the faintest glance over his shoulder. You think this gem can hurt me? Garnet nodded once. Even with the power he had shown, she still clearly believed that fact. He slipped the gem into his cloak, movements unhurried. Then I'll make this simple, he said, voice cool and distant. This gem can't do anything to me. And you won't be taking it from me, so stay out of my way. Amethyst blinked. Oh, he did not just pull that mysterious anti-hero act on them. Pearl's lips parted in disbelief. Stay out of your way. You don't seem to understand who you're talking to. Garnet lifted a hand slightly, silencing her. The air shifted immediately, thicker, heavier, like the ocean itself was holding its breath. I'll give you one last chance to hand it over, Garnet warned, her tone low but edged with something Amethyst didn't hear often. Frustration. He didn't hesitate this time. Sorry, he said, tone final, that's a no. Then he turned his back on them, just turned away, like they weren't even worth the effort. Amethyst's jaw clenched. No one just walks away from Garnet like that. She shifted her stance, whip handle appearing in that second, cold in her palm, irritation crawling up her spine. Garnet still hadn't moved, but Amethyst could feel it. She was seconds away from snapping into action. Pearl's spear gleamed faintly beside her, ready. Stephen, realizing the tension, took a few slow steps back, eyes darting between them. The masked man kept walking, sand crunching softly under his boots, calm, steady, too calm. Before Amethyst could blink, Garnet blurred forward, sand whipping up in her wake. When it settled, Garnet stood in front of the masked man, gripping his cloak tight enough to wrinkle it. She didn't strike, and Amethyst knew why. Garnet didn't hit humans, no matter how smug they acted. For a second, surprise flickered beneath that cracked mask. Then it was gone. Garnet slipped her other hand into his cloak and pulled out the pufferfish gem. It almost seemed over, until his hand shot up, catching her arm. In the same motion, he drove a right hook into her chest, sending Garnet flying back through a burst of sand. Amethyst froze, eyes wide. Pearl and Steven did too. The gem fell to the ground, half buried at his feet. The man brushed off his cloak, calm as ever, before picking up the gem and tucking it away. "I told you," he said flatly, "you won't be taking this from me." That was it, Amethyst's patience snapped. Her fists tightened, a glare burning across her face. If he wasn't going to hand it over, she'd take it herself, and maybe pay him back for knocking Garnet around. Diplomacy was Garnet's thing, Amethyst was done talking. With that last thought, Amethyst bolted forward. Not as fast as Garnet, but fast enough to make the air snap around her. The masked man turned just in time to see her coming, but by then she was already swinging. Her whip cracked twice, sharp and loud, but he slipped out of range both times, moving with a precision that made it look effortless. A scowl carved its way onto her face. She flicked the whip again, this time catching his slack arm. She yanked hard, expecting him to stumble, but he didn't. His stance widened, feet digging into the sand. With a single pull, he held his ground, barely shifting an inch. TCH, Amethyst adjusted fast, using the whip as leverage to launch herself upward. Sand scattered beneath her boots as she swung through the air, aiming to come down on him with everything she had. Amethyst came down fast, launching a quick series of kicks midair. The man barely shifted, then caught her leg with one hand. Her eyes widened. With a twist and a brutal pull, he slammed her into the sand, the impact sending a shudder through the ground, then hurled her aside like she weighed nothing. She hit hard, rolling back until Pearl caught her shoulder to steady her. That kind of strength, no normal human had that. And she saw it, just for a second. A flash of pink, glowing faintly beneath his sleeve. "You saw that, right?" she hissed, pointing at his arm. "He's hiding something." Pearl's brows pinched. "I did, and that strength, no human should be capable of that." The two exchanged a look and nodded, shifting their stances. "We'll take him together," Pearl said, loud enough for him to hear. The man sighed, like their fighting was more of an inconvenience than a threat. "You're loud," he said flatly. "Maybe if I explain, you'll stop wasting my time." Amethyst barked a short laugh. "Now you want to talk, after throwing me into the ground?" "Your friend reached for something she shouldn't have," he replied, his calm never breaking. "I only came here for this gem, and to see you all up close." His tone dropped a little lower, like he was letting something slip on purpose. "I'll be keeping an eye on you, all of you." Before either of them could react, he blurred, like the air folded around him, and vanished. The only thing left was the soft sound of the breeze and the uneven sand where he'd stood. Amethyst blinked. "What the?" Pearl lowered her spear, still tense, scanning the area like he might reappear. "He's gone," she said finally, though the words didn't ease anything. Their weapons dissolved away, tension bleeding into something heavier, confusion. Amethyst crossed her arms, frowning. That guy wasn't just some random human. Pearl's jaw tightened. No, he knew exactly what he was doing, and the way he disappeared, that wasn't something normal either. Steven stepped up from behind them, eyes wide but curious. What just happened? He was right there, and then, poof, gone. Pearl didn't answer right away, still processing. Amethyst just stared at the empty space in front of them, a chill running through her. Whoever that guy was, he'd just made sure they wouldn't forget him. The masked man stepped into the ramen shop, boots clicking softly against the wooden floor. It was a new building, built almost as quickly as he'd arrived in this town. The air still carried that fresh-cut wood scent, warm but sharp, like the place hadn't yet settled into being lived in. The shop itself was dim, lit only by thin rays of sunlight slipping through the windows. Tables were set with surgical neatness, each one positioned just far enough from the next to feel deliberate. The decorations were off, Japanese-style banners with clumsy kanji stretched along the walls, their meaning half lost in translation. Painted dragons curled across the ceiling beams, beautiful but empty. He exhaled, the sound quiet behind the mask. A place that looked like home but wasn't. He moved toward the counter, passing the fixed stools lined up before it. But his attention wasn't on the seats, it was on the single-framed photo propped at the register. He picked it up. The wood of the frame was carved with a swirling whirlpool pattern, the lines etched with care. His thumb slid across the glass, tracing the shape without realizing it. A spiky-haired blonde man stared right back at him. A white bandana tied tight across his forehead, fox-like grin with sharp confidence, accented by the whisker-like birthmarks on his cheeks. He looked young, 20s, maybe younger, no clear baby fat left on his heart-shaped face, two knives in a cross playfully, a form of showmanship. He was surrounded by people, friends, maybe family, laughing in the warm glow of a lively shop. The man under the mask stilled, his grip on the frame tightened just slightly. He peeled the wooden mask from his face and set it on the counter with a quiet clack. "Why do they make these so easily?" he muttered, voice low, a dry edge to it. "Creepy how good they are at making me look like," he gestured vaguely at the picture, that. The face revealed beneath the mask was the same as the photographs. Same hair. Same markings. But the smile was long gone. His eyes held a weight that didn't belong on someone that young, and his hair, lengthened, more wild and untamed, shoulder length. "This damn company," he chuckled, but it came out tired, bitter. "Making me look so happy." Another breath, slower, calmer. He set the photo back down, but this time, turned it face down on the counter. "Guess I should get settled in," he murmured. Voice quieter now, like the weight of staying had finally sunk in. He shrugged off his cloak, revealing a black dress shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. Wrapped around his right arm, black mesh bandages formed a gauntlet, each slot holding a gem, a soft pink aquamarine, a black lapis lazuli, a shifting yellow ruby, and a deep crimson diamond. "All right, you can come out now," he said. A shimmer pulsed through the air, and shapes began to form, not wild, but steady. The pink gem became a small quartz-like creature, rough rocky skin, hair falling over three small horns, perched delicately on his arm. Its claws curled loosely against his skin, gem shining on its forehead. The black lapis took the shape of a three-eyed crow, two eyes on one side, one on the other, wings edged in jagged scales as she settled atop his head like a living crown, gem glinting on her chest. The yellow ruby spilled forward as a restless mass of golden chains, constantly shifting, never still. And behind him, the crimson diamond emerged. Even without turning, he could picture her perfectly, a massive nine-tailed fox, blood-red fur catching what little light the room had, tails flowing like slow flames. They didn't attack, they simply existed with him, calm, connected. He scratched under the quartz creature's chin, voice softening. "Sorry I pushed you so hard in that last fight. Sakura would have been stuck without you." The creature leaned into his touch, letting out a low, playful growl. She was used to him by now, to the way he got dragged into conflicts he didn't really believe in. He smiled faintly. His gaze flicked up, meeting the crow's sharp black eye. "That goes for you too, Satsuki." The crow ruffled her feathers, a quiet, approving sound leaving her. Both of them, monsters, gems, animals, whatever they were, had stood with him during that little run-in with Beach City's protectors. If they could really be called that. Naruto didn't think so, not right now, anyway. He shifted his weight against the counter, glancing at the four gems glowing faintly in the dim light. He didn't have much left of his own power anymore, but these bonds, these broken, loyal shards, were something he could still rely on. It was still there, that invisible thread between him and them. The thing that let him feel their warmth, their presence, even when everything else was gone. Naruto let the silence stretch for a moment, then slowly turned his gaze toward Kara and Kushi. The two gems stood like sentinels. Their energy was calmer now, but the quiet, protective weight they carried filled the shop like a second heartbeat. Kara's presence burned steady, an old wildfire contained but never extinguished. Kushi's chains curled lazily at her sides, glinting faintly in the dim light. He didn't need words to understand them. He could hear them in the back of his mind, steady and familiar. It was something he'd gotten used to a long time ago. "I know," he murmured. "That wasn't the last time I'll see them, but it was a good start." His tone was tired, but there was a faint spark beneath it. "And yeah, I know it wasn't part of the plan. But they did say, engage when necessary. That counts." Naruto exhaled slowly and began to walk through the shop. Sakura drifted down to rest on the floor with a soft metallic clink, while Satsuki perched herself on the counter like a bored cat, tail curling idly. "Still don't get why they switched the flight plan out of nowhere," he muttered. "Didn't even explain until we were already in town, rude." He trailed his fingers across the wooden counter as he moved, letting the thought hang in the air. Beach City, he'd never even heard of it until a few hours ago, and yet a giant puffer fish creature had popped up like it was just Tuesday. The fact that something that dangerous could happen so close to the boardwalk meant the locals were either used to it, or good at pretending they were. "They knew about this place for a while," he said under his breath. "So why send me now?" The question sat heavy. It wasn't just when they sent him, it was why him. He leaned back against the counter, folding his arms. "Watch and study," he recited softly, as if testing how the words felt on his tongue. "Observe the gems protecting the town. Record any monster activity, capture more unintelligent subjects, stay quiet, blend in." That was the mission, a simple recon operation. No full-out fighting, no interventions that weren't needed, just eyes and ears, but simple missions were rarely ever just that. His gaze slid over to the 4 corrupted gems near him. They lingered close, their energy still bound to his own. He couldn't help but chuckle. "Kinda funny, monsters at my back, more monsters at the beach, and a team of shiny space ladies in between. Makes you wonder why they're really here." He tapped his fingers against the counter, the sound soft and steady. "They'd normally send a researcher for something like this, not me." A brief grin ghosted over his lips. "I break things, I don't take notes." If the higher-ups got mad at him for poking around too much, he'd just say it was part of the job. Tactical awareness. Letting the locals react to his presence. Whatever made it sound official. He sighed again and glanced toward the door, where the faintest hint of morning light was starting to creep in. "So, now what, play the friendly local?" His eyes flicked around the shop. The smell of fresh cut wood still clung to the walls. The place wasn't home, but it could look like it. That's all they needed. "Fine," he muttered, half to the gems, half to himself. "I can play the part." The day had barely begun when Naruto set up the shop, the early sunlight painting soft lines across the wooden floor. By the next morning, everything was in place, bowls polished, chopsticks aligned, steam rising gently from the empty ramen pots. Yet the street outside remained quiet. No customers had come. He sat at a table near the door, hands folded loosely, eyes scanning the street through the glass. The shop smelled faintly of fresh noodles and broth, and the lights above glinted softly off the spotless surfaces, even if they hadn't needed cleaning. His family moved quietly around him. Sakura rested on the counter by the face-down photo frame, Kara curled in a smaller, calmer form in the corner, Satsuki perched silently on the table where he sat, and Kushi slithered unseen somewhere between shadows. Naruto allowed himself a small smile, though a flicker of concern passed through him. If a customer were to walk in now, well, that would be an interesting test. But he trusted them, their skill meant they could vanish instantly if needed. That was the point, to blend in, to be invisible. Just a simple ramen shop owner in Beach City. He ran a hand through his hair, now tied back into a spiky ponytail that kept the longer strands out of his face. Gone was the formal suit. He'd traded it for a simple orange sleeveless jacket over a black shirt, dark blue shorts, and sandals. Summer was creeping closer, and the warmth already hinted at long, lazy days ahead. All that was left now was to wait for someone to come in, or for his own curiosity to push him into the street to scout. And then, just as the first faint creak of the door sounded, his family vanished. Their gems slipped quickly into the slots of the gauntlet he had unwound into a makeshift necklace under his shirt, hidden beneath the folds of his jacket. Naruto leaned back slightly, calm and ready, waiting for the day to truly begin. The bell above the door jingled. A small boy shuffled inside, muttering to himself. "I wonder what this place is, looks like a restaurant, but what's a ramen?" Naruto's eyes flicked up, calm and observant. Kid's monologue now, weird, and why is he alone? Then his gaze sharpened, that little figure, it was the same kid who'd hidden behind the gems the other day. A shame he hadn't gotten those three's names before slipping away. But one thing bugged him, why did they have a human kid with them? It didn't add up, for a group that called themselves protectors, having some fluffy-haired kid tagging along made no sense. He leaned back slightly, thinking it over, then got his answer. For a split second, a soft pink glow pulsed under the boy's shirt. Gem, no, Naruto decided quickly. Human, but that glow, there's no mistaking it. Half gem, then. Naruto leaned back in his chair, voice casual but measured. "Morning, you looking for something to eat, or just exploring?" Steven startled at the voice, then quickly relaxed into wide-eyed curiosity. Who are you? Are you new to Beach City?" "I've never seen this shop before, or maybe it wasn't open." "Moved in a week ago," Naruto replied smoothly, "but set up today." A small, harmless half-lie. The kid didn't catch it. Steven's eyes brightened. "Well, I guess I can say, welcome to Beach City." Then he puffed out his chest, "It's my sworn duty to help people in need. So, I'm gonna work for you now." Naruto tilted his head, amused. "Work for me, what are you talking about?" "I've been looking for someone to help all morning," Steven said, hands waving dramatically. "A job, to get some money for my favorite video game update." Naruto's lips quirked, earnest, definitely human. He couldn't fault the kid for that, but something else nagged at him. "Shouldn't you be in school?" "What's that?" Steven asked, genuinely confused. "The place you go to learn things you don't always need," Naruto said dryly, blinking at him. When the boy only blinked back, Naruto almost said more but decided against it. He's probably with the gems most of the time, no school for him. Depending on how this kid came to be, that's a little troubling. He watched Steven fidget and finally spoke gently. "Anyway, I'm not really looking for workers. Small town like this, probably won't get many customers." Steven raised an eyebrow, "Then why move here?" Naruto shrugged, "I have my reasons, besides, it'd take time to even teach you the basics. Not exactly something you'd want to do." Steven blinked, then nodded eagerly, "I can learn, really fast." Naruto chuckled softly, a hint of surprise slipping through. Then a quiet exhale. "That's nice kid, but I'm pretty sure it'd still be a bad idea. Wouldn't want you making food for me, which is kinda essential for everyone to have some knowledge on cooking in a ramen shop. And it's ramen, by the way, not ramen." Steven's shoulders slumped, disappointment weighed heavy in the small space. Naruto watched him silently, noting how quickly the boy's hope rose and fell. He really wants to help someone he just met. Can't even explain why, but it gets to me. Kid means well. Maybe, letting him help a little wouldn't hurt. And if he really was close to those gems, it'd save Naruto some time keeping an eye on them. He sighed softly, decision made. "Alright, I'll think about letting you help," he said at last. Steven perked up instantly. But first, Naruto added, I'll make you a bowl of ramen, that way you actually know what it is. Steven's face lit up. Really, thank you. Naruto allowed himself a small smile. If you still want to help after that, maybe you can work here, but only after you learn the basics. Steven practically bounced in place, excitement radiating off him. Naruto shook his head with a quiet chuckle, stepping into the kitchen and grabbing a white brandan from a shelf. By the way, he said over his shoulder, what's your name, so I don't have to keep calling you, kid, Steven, Steven Universe. Alright, Steven, Naruto replied, calm and assured. I'm Naruto Uzumaki, welcome to my shop, now step into the kitchen, watch closely. With that last word, Naruto moved like a machine, quick, efficient, every motion precise. There was a quiet elegance to the way he worked, the ease of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. Steven watched, wide-eyed, as the blonde flowed through the kitchen, grasping the homemade noodles, setting them in to boil, stirring the broth with practiced ease, preparing the toppings with a fluid, almost rhythmic grace. This wasn't new to Naruto. Even with everything else his life demanded, cooking ramen had become second nature to him. Maybe that's why the higher-ups had chosen this as his cover. It wasn't a lie. It was something real. Steven leaned forward, practically glued to the counter, or written all over his face. To him, this wasn't just cooking, it looked like some kind of quiet performance. 15 minutes later, Naruto placed a steaming bowl in front of him. The broth's rich scent immediately filled the shop, warm and inviting. The noodle sat in a smaller bowl than the display ones on the shelves, but it still bore the intricate red fox designs painted against smooth white marble. Steven's eyes lit up, the excited expression on his face practically glowing in the rising steam. Naruto caught himself glancing at the bowl, wondering again just how much money had been sunk into this place. Steven stared at the bowl for a moment like it was a treasure chest. Then, clumsily, he lifted the chopsticks Naruto had placed beside it and poked at the noodles. It took some time before he was even able to slight move the chopsticks the right way, giving. The steam rose, making him squint before finally taking a big slurp, probably too big. His cheeks puffed out, his eyes went wide, and for a second it looked like his brain just stopped working. Then it hit him. This is amazing, Steven blurted out, kicking his feet a little as the warmth of the broth settled in. He dove in again, much less hesitant this time. I've never had something this good before. Naruto leaned back against the counter, arms crossed loosely, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. Glad you like it, don't get used to it being free though. Next bowl's gonna cost ya. Steven froze mid-bite, eyes wide again. Then he laughed, realizing Naruto was joking, mostly. Fair, totally fair, worth it. Naruto chuckled under his breath, shaking his head slightly. Kid's got spirit, easy to read too. Reminds me of, he stopped that thought before it could go anywhere. Steven raised a finger dramatically, still holding his chopsticks. Well, I mean, maybe not the best thing ever. Fry bits are still number one, but this is a close second. For a split second, Naruto's eye twitched. Not enough to scare the kid, but enough to show a quiet, deeply personal offense had been taken. Fry bits, he repeated, deadpan. Yeah, Steven beamed. They're crunchy and salty and perfect. Naruto stared at him like he was considering a grave betrayal. Then he huffed through his nose. The faintest hint of a grin breaking through. You've got no taste, kid. Steven laughed again, cheeks flushed from the warmth of the ramen and the easy teasing. It was strange, Naruto wasn't exactly warm, not in the loud, friendly way Steven was used to, but his calm way of talking, the little hints of dry humor, made it feel comfortable. Safe, even. When the bowl was finally empty, Steven set it down with both hands, almost reverently. I have to work here now, he declared with all the seriousness of someone taking a magical oath. Naruto arched an eyebrow, that so? Yeah, if I work here, I get to eat this more, and I can help. The thought of letting this overly enthusiastic half-gem run around the shop still didn't quite sound like a good idea. But Naruto couldn't ignore how genuine the kid was being. That kind of stubborn kindness had a way of pulling people in before they noticed. Steven hopped off the stool, brushing off his shirt. "Okay, I'll find you some customers before I go home, people need to try this." Naruto blinked. "Customers?" "Yeah, I know everyone in town, I'll at least get 2 people, Steven said seriously. Naruto hadn't expected that. He'd come here to blend in quietly, not have some kid campaigning for his shop. Yet, a few extra customers would help make his cover look more natural. And, if nothing else, the way Steven's face lit up made it hard to shoot him down. "Sure," Naruto finally said, a small smile ghosting across his face. "Go cause some trouble." Steven saluted, before spinning toward the door, still grinning. Naruto watched him go, the soft jingle of the bell trailing behind him. Loud kid, he thought, amused despite himself. But maybe not the worst kind to have around. Steven came back not too long later, the bell above the door giving a bright little jingle as he stepped inside. It clicked shut behind him, but only for a heartbeat. Another pair of chimes followed as the door swung open again. Naruto's eyes flicked up from where he was wiping down the counter, gaze settling on the 2 stragglers trailing after Steven. Instinct kicked in, quietly sizing them up without much effort. The girl looked like she worked too hard and slept too little. A hoodie hung loose off one shoulder, platinum blonde hair slightly tousled in a soft, natural kind of way. She was on the shorter side, just a bit taller than Steven, and a little chubby, with a friendly, approachable air. Warm curiosity lingered in her eyes, the kind of expression that told Naruto she'd help you carry something heavy just because you asked. The boy, by contrast, carried himself like the world bored him. Hands buried deep in his pockets, shoulders slouched, a stubborn frown creasing his face as if just being here was beneath him. His tuft of hair was deliberately messy, tried too hard not to try, and he was lanky. Towering over both the girl and Steven. Almost eye level with Naruto. The friendly one and the attitude problem, Naruto mused, setting the rag aside. This'll be fun. Steven beamed, practically bouncing as he spun on his heel toward Naruto. "Okay, so, I couldn't really find anyone else who wasn't busy," he admitted, rubbing the back of his neck, "but Sadie and Lars love soup, so this was a total win." Lars, who was standing a step behind, narrowed his eyes. "Wow, thanks, Steven," he drawled, every syllable dripping with sarcastic cool. "I love soup." His voice made it very clear he did not, in fact, love noodles. Steven just chuckled, a little oblivious, while Lars sighed and slouched further into his hoodie. "I didn't even want to come," he muttered. "My parents forced me to tag along with these 2 losers." Naruto raised an eyebrow. "Yep, nailed the analysis. Who even wants to go to a soup place anyway? I've had plenty of cup noodles," Lars added with a smirk. "Let me tell you, not that good." Sadie turned toward him immediately. "Lars," she said, voice carrying that tired but firm note of someone who's had to do this more than once, "be nice." Steven giggled, because in his world Lars joking meant everything was fine. Naruto, though, just leaned against the counter, calm but with a sharp edge in his voice. "It's fine," he said easily. "But if insults are the only thing coming out of your mouth, maybe you should learn to shut it." The moment froze just long enough for everyone to register it, then Steven broke into a laugh, Sadie covering her mouth to stifle a snort. Even Lars blinked, thrown off for half a second. Naruto smirked faintly. "Besides," he added, tilting his head at Lars, "cup noodles aren't anything like real ramen. And if you think they are, maybe you just have very basic taste buds." Steven let out another bright laugh, Sadie followed, and Lars tried, really tried, to come up with something to fire back. But whatever he said came out half-baked and mumbled. This is going to be fun, Naruto thought, amusement simmering just beneath his calm exterior. Whoever said a mission had to be all work and no play was wrong. He'd always been good at balancing both, well, most of the time. Sadie, ever the polite one, decided to smooth things over. She stepped a little closer, offering a small smile. "I'm Sadie, by the way, and that grumpy mess is Lars, sorry if he's, you know." "Yeah," Lars said flatly, "grumpy mess, nice to meet ya." Naruto just raised an eyebrow, amused. Sadie tucked a bit of hair behind her ear. "So, are you new in town?" "Yeah," Naruto replied easily. "Been here about a week, only really talked to you three." She chuckled softly, then he spoke again, "And I guess 2 out of 3 good people isn't bad." Naruto cracked a faint grin. "I'll let you guess who the third is." Lars scoffed, but Sadie laughed, the warmth of it soft and honest. She glanced at the counter, curiosity flickering in her eyes. "So ramen, is it really that different from, like cup noodles?" Naruto straightened up slightly, his voice casual but steady. "Completely different. Cup noodles are shortcuts, they skip the flavor, the care. Real ramen is built layer by layer. Broth, noodles, toppings, it's about putting something together that actually means something." She nodded, listening like it actually mattered. And for her, Naruto could tell, it did. She looked like someone who didn't get a lot of time to just stop. Even talking about food felt like a little break. Then her gaze softened a little more. "So, how'd you even put this shop together so fast? I swear it wasn't here last week." Naruto gave a loose shrug, had some time to prepare, set things up before opening and placing decorations. Sadie tilted her head, "And you're here alone?" Naruto paused, not because he didn't have an answer, but because that question always sat with him. His hand brushed briefly against the necklace under his shirt, the cool gems pressing into his skin. His family, his team. Changed, complicated. He forced a small breath. "Yeah, I'm alone." A lie, but a necessary one. Lars, of course, jumped right in. "So wait, you own this place?" "Yes." Lars made a face, weird. Sadie elbowed him lightly. What he meant was, "It's kinda surprising, you look a little young to be running a whole shop by yourself." Naruto tilted his head, considering that for a second. Technically, they weren't wrong. But in his line of work, owning a ramen shop at 18 was one of the least weird things. He gave a simple shrug. 18 might be young for some, but it's not a big deal for me." Then his easy grin returned, a spark of playfulness behind it. "Now, are you guys ready to order, or what? Steven promised me customers." Steven pumped his fist enthusiastically. Sadie laughed. Lars just muttered something under his breath, but didn't leave. Naruto leaned back slightly, watching the three with a spark of quiet amusement in his eyes. Yeah, he thought, this was gonna be an interesting mission. Naruto moved behind the counter again with the same quiet precision he'd shown Steven earlier. His hands worked with easy rhythm, flour-dusted motion, quick and clean. The pot hissed as water bubbled, noodles sank in, and steam curled lazily through the small shop. He added the broth next, smooth and practiced, sliding toppings into place with a flick of his wrist. To anyone else, it might have just been cooking. But to Naruto, this was routine, calm, controlled, almost meditative. He placed 2 bowls down on the counter, the same intricate fox design gleaming faintly against the white ceramic, though the bowls were bigger than what he gave Steven. The steam rose between the trio like a warm curtain. Sadie and Lars exchanged a glance before picking up the chopsticks. Lars fumbled first, clacking them together like they were tongs. Sadie wasn't much better, her fingers cramped up, and a single noodle nearly slipped back into the broth. Do you have forks?" Lars muttered, halfway between annoyed and embarrassed. Naruto leaned his elbow against the counter, unbothered. "Yeah, morning shipment." Lars shot him a flat look. Naruto's only response was the slightest twitch of a grin. Sadie adjusted her grip again, concentrating with surprising determination. After a few awkward moments, she got it right, lifting a clean strand of noodles without losing it. Lars followed, badly, but managed enough to look like he knew what he was doing. Their reactions came almost at once. Lars froze for half a second, trying to hide the flicker of surprise that crossed his face. "I mean, it's not bad," he mumbled, stuffing another bite in to cover it up. Sadie's face lit up with a genuine smile. "This is really good," she said warmly. "I'm glad Steven dragged us here." Naruto gave a small nod in thanks, not making a big deal out of it. Compliments were nice, but they didn't surprise him. If there was one thing he was confident about, it was ramen. "Glad you like it," he said evenly, leaning back against the counter. His tone was relaxed, but the corner of his mouth twitched into the smallest, satisfied smile. They finished their bowls slower than Steven had. Sadie took her time, savoring every bite, while Lars did his best to act unimpressed even as he scraped the bottom for the last of the broth. Naruto collected their empty dishes with practiced ease, stacking them at the back of the counter. Sadie leaned forward on her elbows, cheeks a little flushed from the heat of the ramen. "Seriously, that was amazing," she said, smiling wide. "How'd you even learn to cook like that?" Naruto didn't miss a beat. "Picked it up while traveling," he said casually, wiping down the counter. It was simple, believable. No need to mention learning to cook in pauses of covert training. Sadie nodded, clearly impressed. "Well, you're really good at it. It's not every day Beach City gets a new place that's actually this good." She leaned back in her chair, satisfied. Lars didn't say anything, but the fact that his bowl was spotless was plenty. Then came the next question, light and curious. "SOC, how long are you planning on staying in Beach City?" Naruto paused just long enough to make it seem like he was thinking. Truth was, even he didn't know how long this mission would stretch. "For the foreseeable future," he answered evenly, not too firm, not too vague. Before Sadie could ask anything else, Steven practically burst from his seat, eyes sparkling. "So, did I do good?" he asked, his voice full of that barely contained energy he'd been sitting on the entire time. Naruto tilted his head, watching the kid fidget like he might vibrate through the floor. A low chuckle slipped out before he could stop it. "Yeah kid, you did fine. You can work here, just a little, enough to earn some pocket cash. Don't expect a full salary." Steven's face lit up like a switch had been flipped. "Yes," he spun around to Sadie and Lars, throwing both arms up in a little victory pose. "I got the job." Sadie beamed right back, her tone bright and kind. "That's awesome Steven, you'll do great." Lars just gave a shrug and muttered something non-committal, but he didn't look nearly as annoyed as he had when they walked in. Naruto leaned against the counter, arms loosely crossed. Watching the small scene unfold with that quiet, steady calm of his. If this was how this mission went for the rest of his time here, he could get used to it. Then the bell above the door gave another soft ring. Another customer, his eyes flicked toward the entrance, posture shifting just slightly, still relaxed, but alert underneath it all. The doorbell gave a soft chime as it opened again. A tall, broad-shouldered man stepped inside, ducking his head just slightly under the frame. He didn't smile, didn't speak. His presence alone carried weight, heavy, tense, like a storm just out of sight. Sadie leaned toward the others, whispering, "I've never seen him around town before." Lars stiffened a little. Steven's chatter died down, his wide eyes flicking to Naruto for some kind of cue. Naruto didn't move much, just raised his head from the counter and gave the guy a calm, blank look. "Yo," Naruto greeted casually. "You here for food?" The man's voice was low and rough. "Yeah. Been traveling, needed a quick pick-me-up. Your place was the first thing I saw." There was something about the way he said it that didn't sit right, too smooth, too pointed, but Naruto didn't jump to conclusions. You could never really judge someone on looks alone. "All right," Naruto said simply. "What'll it be?" "Spicy miso," the man answered. "Extra hot." "Got it," Naruto gave a small, almost amused smile before heading into the back to cook. While Naruto worked, the man sat near the main stand. He didn't fidget. He didn't look around. He just waited, still as stone. That stillness made Steven's leg bounce, Larsa's jaw tighten, and Sadie's hands fidget with the hem of her hoodie. None of them wanted to be near the guy, but none of them moved either. If Naruto wasn't worried, they tried not to be either. Naruto returned with the steaming bowl and handed over the chopsticks. The man grabbed them smoothly, like someone who'd used them all his life, and tore into the ramen without hesitation. The quick, practiced movement surprised Naruto a little, but not enough to care. He went back to chatting idly with the trio, letting the atmosphere breathe a little. Then the man stood up, towering over them. "Ah, that was good," he said, tossing the chopsticks into the empty bowl. "I should be off now." Naruto turned toward him, calm as ever. "You forgot to pay." The man looked at the bowl, then back at Naruto. "I think I'm good, just ate, don't feel like coughing up cash." "Oh. So that was the game, big guy, probably used to pushing people around." "That's not how it works," Naruto said smoothly. "Everyone pays, or you can start a tab if you want." But that was a full-sized bowl, not free. The man tilted his head, grin widening. "Yeah, no, not gonna do a tab." The air tightened as their exchange hardened. The man's voice coarsened, each word dragging closer to threats. Then he turned his attention to the small trio at the side of the shop. "Maybe I'll just take something of theirs," he said casually, leering. "Enough cash to cover it, shake M down right here." "That won't be necessary," Naruto said quickly. The man laughed, low and ugly. "Come on, the girl's cute enough, she's got to have some cash on her." "You're making a scene," Naruto said simply, though his thoughts grew in anger. The man's face twisted, a bit of annoyance showing. "At least let me take cash from the tall one. He looks like a brat and you wouldn't mind me taking from him, would you?" "I really would," Naruto responded again, quick. The man sneered and jabbed a thumb toward Steven. "Bet that round kid's got cash, looks like he saves for treats." That line snapped whatever patience the Naruto had left. Tossing a predator's leer toward two teens, a child, toward anyone, was the one thing Naruto wouldn't let slide. He didn't shout, he didn't lunge, he simply shifted his weight, ready. Finally the man barked, "If you really want me to pay up, then make me." Naruto sighed, almost bored. A part of him actually liked putting guys like this back in their place. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his earbuds, and slid one in. Then he scrolled through his phone until he found a track. "Do you really want to do this?" the thug asked, cocky. Naruto clicked the song. A low beat started pulsing. "Yeah," he answered, not even looking up. The man threw the first punch. Naruto moved on rhythm, sidestepping effortlessly. Another punch came. He dipped his shoulder, let it slide past, still matching the beat. On the next beat drop, Naruto caught the man's wrist and buried two quick hits into his stomach. The thug folded forward, coughing. Naruto pivoted, added 3 short jabs to the ribs, clean, efficient. When the man tried to straighten up, Naruto swept his legs out from under him. One more beat, and Naruto kicked him clean through the front window, glass exploding outward onto the boardwalk. He stepped through the hole calmly, cracking his knuckles as the man scrambled on the sidewalk. "You know," Naruto said evenly, "I really hate it when guys like you try to walk over everyone. But I'll give you one last chance. Pay for your food. Pay for my broken window. Leave Beach City. And never come back. Deal?" The man, breathing hard, nodded quickly. "Okay." Naruto's blank face softened into his usual chill expression, a small smile tugging at his mouth. "Good." He walked back into the shop like nothing happened. Steven was the first to react, eyes shining. That was so cool. Like, bam. Pow. He started throwing little punches in the air, completely hyped. Sadie was still a little shaky. But she managed a breathy laugh. "You're just calm about that?" she asked. Lars let out a low whistle. "Okay, not bad," he muttered, trying not to show he'd been nervous too. Naruto just shrugged, he was asking for it. He stepped behind the counter, grabbed the broom, and started sweeping up the shards of glass like it was just another shift. Steven couldn't stop buzzing about how awesome it was. Sadie helped with the glass. Lars muttered something about telling this story later. Naruto just worked in silence for a moment, letting the sound of the broom scrape across the floor. For all the chaos, he felt steady. This mission might have been boring on paper, but moments like this? They reminded him why he never minded mixing work with a little play. The Lars and Sadie paid for their bowls without fuss. Steven hopped off his stool, practically vibrating with excitement as he promised, "I'll be back tomorrow, first day on the job." Sadie waved and Lars grumbled something that passed for approval. Naruto nodded once, gave a small wave, and watched them go, the bell over the door jingling as they left. Back inside, he stacked the empty bowls, the motion automatic. The thug was gone, just another jerk who tried to push people around. Naruto could handle men like that easily. What actually annoyed him was that the man had threatened 2 teens and a child. That prick of anger, quiet, hot and bordering on protective, didn't show on his face. But it lodged under his skin, but it did allow him to think. He leaned against the counter for a moment, eyes drifting to the window. Outside, the morning sunlight fell softly over Beach City, the streets quiet and unassuming. Naruto outstretched a hand, letting his connection flow. A few birds in the air responded, weaving into a loose figure 8, twisting and looping under his subtle guidance. Calm, precise, unnoticed. He let his thoughts drift to the kid. They'd only known each other a day, but Naruto's instincts had already done the work he never trusted to luck. He'd read Steven. Kind. Innocent. A little ridiculous. A beacon with teeth. There was something there, something more than a kid who liked fry bits. He'd caught that faint pink flare under Steven's shirt, his connection had told him enough. The boy had power, whether he knew how to use it or not. And he was just a kid. Naruto straightened, thumb brushing the hidden gems at his throat as if to reassure himself they were there. No matter the mission, he wouldn't drag Steven into the agency's business. He wouldn't use the kid, or any kid, as an unwitting tool or a baited line. He'd watch. He'd keep his distance. But if anyone tried to make a target of Steven, if the town or his own employers ever put the boy at risk, Naruto would be the one who stepped in. For now, the shop hummed with broth and the small ordinary noises of a morning well handled. Naruto set the broom aside and let the quiet settle. He'd keep an eye. That would be enough. After that, 2 weeks slipped by quickly. Summer drew closer, and Naruto had fallen into a daily rhythm without really trying. The ramen shop had picked up a bit of traction, not a booming success, but about 50 customers a day was enough to keep things steady. For a small town like Beach City, that was plenty. Most of the town's income came from tourists, and the big summer wave hadn't hit yet. But the nearby housing meant there was at least a regular trickle of locals. A big part of that came from Steven. Over the weeks, the boy had practically made the ramen shop his second home, talking it up to anyone who'd listen. Eager to help out wherever he could. Naruto hadn't decided if he should be grateful for the free marketing or worry about being swarmed when summer really hit. He liked ramen, sure, but his cover couldn't become a full-time job. Still, the kid was good help. Naruto taught him how to serve tables, take orders, and even started showing him how to make ramen from scratch. Almost every day, Steven dropped by, bright-eyed and ready to work, earning what he could. And somewhere between the long shifts and quiet evenings, the kid had started to feel less like a helper and more like a little brother. Someone he hadn't realized he'd missed. That closeness, though, made the danger stand out sharper. Even in just 2 weeks, Naruto had seen Steven get too close to trouble more times than he liked. The gems clearly had their own duties beyond monster hunting, but the boy always ended up tagging along. More like he begged his way into danger. And though Naruto stayed within the boundaries of his mission, he'd started keeping a closer watch. Sometimes that meant stepping in, stealing a monster out from under their noses, disappearing into the shadows before they could pin him down. Amethyst had learned to yell after him at this point. The more he saw, the clearer things became. This wasn't a typical assignment. Usually, when he was sent out, it was to deal with something dangerous. Wild creatures. Rogue aliens. Things that couldn't be reasoned with. But the gems didn't fit that description. Reckless sometimes, sure, but they protected the city, not threatened it. That didn't line up with the briefing. Not even close. He didn't have proof of anything. No intercepted messages, no odd orders, nothing concrete. Just an itch at the back of his head. A feeling honed by years of dangerous work, one that told him when something beneath the surface wasn't sitting right. He'd learned not to ignore that feeling. Naruto leaned on that instinct now. He didn't know what was off about this mission yet, or why they'd send him here of all people. But it wasn't nothing. And if that feeling grew any louder, he'd be ready. So, what's the plan? Amethyst's voice came first, breaking the silence that had settled over the crystal gem's home. Sunlight spilled through the wide windows, catching against the wooden beams and stone walls, filling the space with a midday glow. Outside, Beach City was quiet, but inside, the air hung thick and tense. Amethyst sat on the kitchen counter, legs swinging idly, her bored expression undercut by the faint edge of annoyance. Her eyes drifted toward Pearl, who stood in front of her, calmer than Amethyst, but clearly deep in thought. One hand rested under her chin, her gaze fixed on the wooden floor beneath Rose's portrait. Its shadow stretching across the room. Garnet leaned silently against the back of the couch beneath Stephen's lofted room, her expression unreadable. Still, the faint pull of tension around her made it clear she felt it too. The stillness pressed down on the three of them, the weight of unspoken concerns hanging heavier by the second as Pearl tried to find where to begin their earlier conversation. Maybe, the taller gem finally began, her voice quiet but steady. Then she lifted her gaze to Amethyst. Maybe we should go over the situation one more time. Amethyst let out a loud, exaggerated groan, the sound echoing through the temple. Why do we have to keep going over it? She complained, glaring at Pearl. We've already restarted this, like, 10 times. Instead of talking in circles, shouldn't we be figuring out how to fix it? She turned toward Garnet, hoping for backup. Garnet only exhaled slowly. Calm down, Amethyst. Pearl's just trying to make sure we've covered every angle. This is a big problem. If we're going to solve it, we need to be thorough. The lavender-haired gem crossed her arms and scowled, but didn't argue further. Okay, Pearl said after a moment, pulling her hands together and glancing between the two. Let's start again. Her voice steadied as she laid out the facts. 2 weeks ago, we were interrupted by the appearance of the masked man. He used abilities no human should have and took a corrupted gem right out from under us. Since then, he's managed to appear after every fight, slipping in just as we poofed the monsters, stealing their gems, and vanishing without a trace. And we still don't know who he is, how he has those powers, or what he's doing with the gems. Amethyst let out another groan, more irritated this time. This is pointless, she muttered. Why can't we just use my plan the next time he shows up? Because your plan of jumping him isn't a plan, Pearl snapped, her tone shifting from calm to sharp. He disappears in mere moments, or did you forget that? Amethyst turned away again, her frown deepening. But she didn't argue. Pearl's right, Garnet finally spoke, her voice low but firm. Both gems looked toward her, Garnet's gaze didn't waver as she continued, even if we could get him to stay in one place, which we probably can't, his strength is at our level. His speed and agility are close to mine. And the way he moves, it isn't clumsy, it's calculated. He knows exactly what he's doing. Amethyst frowned, letting the words settle. Garnet pushed on. Not to mention my future vision has been useless in every one of our encounters. A short, heavy silence followed. After their first fight with the masked man, Garnet had noticed something deeply unsettling whenever he was near. The future around him blurred into static. She could see the world, events, everything else, except him. It was as if he existed, but didn't. A blank spot, a ghost tangled in reality. It made predicting him impossible. And made fighting him an even bigger pain. The silence stretched until Amethyst finally broke it. "So what do we do?" she asked, crossing her arms. Pearl straightened. "We figure out who he is first." Amethyst blinked. "That's it, that's your big plan?" "It's better than rushing into a fight we can't win," Pearl countered. "Instead of trying to track him down or wait for him to strike, we find out anything we can about him." Amethyst groaned loudly. "Ugh, boring. And how exactly are we supposed to do that? We can't use Garnet's future vision, remember?" Pearl gave Garnet a quick glance. "We don't need future vision for this, no offense, Garnet." "None taken," Garnet replied calmly. Pearl took a step forward, hands folding behind her back. "He's not some otherworldly figure warping in from space. His constant reappearances prove he's staying close. Likely here in Beach City. Instant teleportation doesn't have that kind of range without a warp pad." That made Amethyst perk up just a little. "So what, we just beat up every guy in town until one of them's a blonde idiot in a suit and tie?" Pearl's eyes widened. "No, absolutely not." But Garnet tilted her head. "Considering, she's not entirely wrong, if he's living in Beach City, then technically, everyone here is a suspect." The three of them went quiet again, the weight of the situation pressing down. Then Amethyst snapped her fingers. "What about that guy Steven's been working for? He's new in town, right? And Steven only started hanging out with him, like, 2 weeks ago. You know, around the same time Masky showed up." Her expression soured as she spoke the nickname. Pearl smirked slightly, seizing the chance. "You also around the same time he took you down?" "He didn't take anything," Amethyst barked, cheeks flushing red. "And he's just some guy who can't win a fight without pulling cheap shots." Of the three of them, Amethyst had taken the most beatings during their encounters with the masked man. While Garnet and Pearl managed to get in a few hits, she hadn't landed a single one, always countered, always slammed into the ground. It stung more than she'd ever admit. Pearl chuckled under her breath, but before Amethyst could snap back, Garnet spoke. "She might be right," Garnet said. "Steven's new boss, it wouldn't hurt to investigate him." That quiet statement hung in the air. None of them liked it. But it was the only lead they had. The three gems exchanged a look, silent agreement forming between them. For the first time, the masked man wasn't just a ghost in the dark. He had a possible face. And if he really was who they thought he might be, then things were about to get complicated. Naruto ran the rag across the countertop, rubbing away faint smudges of broth and oil until the surface gleamed. The shop was quiet, the kind of stillness that made the air feel heavier. Sakura and Satsuki were curled up on one of the benches, both dozing softly, while Kushi and Kara lounged nearby on their usual tables, alert but relaxed. Today had been slow, barely any customers, not enough work to justify calling Steven in. It wasn't unusual, not yet anyway. Tourist season hadn't hit, and Beach City always had that lazy lull in the air. But Naruto couldn't shake the itch crawling under his skin. The quiet gave him too much time to think, about the mission, about the company's silence, about how easily Steven had slipped into his orbit. His fingers drummed absently on the counter. Maybe he should have started his watch over the gem's early day. Right as that thought passed, the bell over the door chimed and Steven pushed it open, his usual grin already plastered on his face. Naruto looked up from his post, cloth still hanging loosely from his hand. His family quickly slipped out of sight, hidden the moment Steven stepped in. "Hey Naruto," Steven called, half jogging inside like he always did. Naruto raised a brow and smiled lightly. Yo. What are you doing back here? Thought I told you I didn't need help today. It was right around the time Steven usually showed up to check on the shop, but Naruto was sure he'd made it clear there wasn't any need today. Steven leaned against the counter, bouncing on his heels. Yeah, I know, but the gems want to meet you. That got Naruto's attention. Meet me, he repeated, tone casual, though his eyes narrowed just a touch before slipping back into their usual calm. Yeah, Steven nodded fast, excitement practically spilling out of him. They just told me to come get you, I dunno why, but hey, it's pretty cool, right? They don't usually do this unless I'm the one asking. Naruto let out a low hum, leaning his weight against the counter. Steven talked about the gems all the time, but this was different. Out of nowhere. He'd expected the boy might have mentioned him to them, sure, but for them to want to meet him, something was off. So they want me to come up, Naruto asked, to the beach house in the side of the hill? Steven flashed him that eager smile again. Come on, it'll be fun. Naruto huffed a quiet laugh through his nose, more habit than ease. He'd grown used to Steven's endless enthusiasm. The kid made everything sound simple. But the timing, the way it came out of nowhere, yeah, it didn't sit right with him. Still, no reason to show it. Alright, let's go then, the shop probably won't get any more customers anyway. He said, tossing the cloth aside and stepping out from behind the counter. Steven pumped his fists with a little bounce before turning on his heel. Naruto followed close behind, quiet, thoughts already sharpening. They wanted to meet him. Hopefully, they hadn't figured him out yet. 2 weeks wasn't a lot of time. And if they had, what exactly would he tell his employers then? The afternoon sun hit them as they stepped out of the shop, Steven walking a few paces ahead, humming something light under his breath while Naruto locked the door behind them. The sound of the ocean wasn't far off, just the usual beach city rhythm, but his mind was already rolling through possibilities. So, Naruto said, sliding his hands into his pockets as they started down the path, what exactly did they say? Steven tilted his head back to look at him, still grinning. Not much really. They just said they wanted to meet you. Well, Garnet didn't say anything. Pearl just kinda told me to bring you, and Amethyst looked, you know. Amethyst why? Naruto huffed softly, half amused, that's it? Yup, no big speeches or anything, which is weird, actually. Pearl loves speeches. Steven said it like he was sharing some secret joke. Naruto chuckled lightly, keeping his pace steady. Sure, they could be suspicious. It was a possibility he'd already considered after the first week. Mainly because the masked man, and his own appearance was so close. But the odds of them connecting all the dots were slim. He'd been careful, more than careful, his tracks were clean. Maybe they're just curious, Steven added, glancing at him. I mean, I've been talking about you a lot lately. Pearl says it's good I made a new friend. And Amethyst probably just wants free ramen. Naruto smirked faintly at that, the expression easing into something warmer as Steven laughed at his own comment. The kid had that way of making everything sound harmless. Guess we'll find out soon enough, Naruto said. Steven didn't notice the way Naruto's gaze had sharpened a little, the way he scanned their surroundings out of habit. His voice stayed calm, casual, but under that easy exterior his thoughts were already sliding into place like a well-built machine. Curiosity, or suspicion, either was manageable. If it was curiosity, good, if it was suspicion, well, he had ways to handle that too. Steven kept talking about small things, the shop, Lion doing something weird, a random tourist tripping into the water, and Naruto listened, actually listened, even responding here and there. But under the conversation, he was running contingencies. By the time they reached the sand that sloped up toward the temple, the easy mood shifted in Naruto's chest. He didn't even have to step inside to feel it. His ability brushed against the air around the place like a current meeting a storm. 3 distinct emotional signatures, sharp, layered, messy. Suspicion sat heavy and pointed. Annoyance hummed around it, restless like a blade being tapped on the edge of a table. Underneath that was worry, calm, calculation, more than enough to know this wasn't some casual welcome party. Naruto stopped just a breath away from the front door. Steven didn't notice, already halfway up the steps. Yeah, they were definitely onto him. He could work with that. The masked man, that was the face they knew. The ghost that took their monsters. A shape with no name. If they ever connected him, Naruto Uzumaki, ramen shop owner, a face that actually existed in their little town, to that ghost, the mission would fall apart before he could blink. They'd watch him, pin him, question him. If they started connecting the dots, it'd get messy fast. He wasn't ready to pull out yet. Not while this simple mission was still simple. So he straightened up, pushed that familiar calm over his features, and followed Steven toward the door. If they wanted to look, then he'd make sure they saw nothing. Steven was the first to step through the door, voice already bright. "Hey guys, I got him." The moment he came in, though, his grin faltered just slightly. The gems were waiting for them. Pearl stood with her hands folded too neatly in front of her, Amethyst was leaned against the wall. Arms crossed and glare sharp, and Garnet just stood there, still, quiet, but her presence felt heavier than usual. Steven wasn't dumb, he could feel it, something was off. What's up?" he asked, lifting a hand in a small wave. "Naruto's here." Pearl nodded once. "Thank you Steven, we'd like to speak with Mr. Naruto for a moment." "Alone?" Steven blinked, confused. "Why?" "It's nothing serious," Pearl said smoothly. "We just have a few questions for him." Naruto let out a quiet chuckle. "You can drop the mister, I'm only 18. He turned to Steven with a calm smile, the kind he knew would put the kid at ease. "Go on, I'll be fine, they did say they wanted to meet me. Right?" Steven hesitated, shifting on his feet. "Yeah, but I've only ever seen them act like this when they're about to overreact about something." That made Naruto pause for a fraction of a second. So the kids had to deal with this before. He hid the small flicker of concern behind another easy grin. "I'll be fine," he said, firm enough for Steven to believe it. Steven didn't look entirely convinced, but he nodded and headed out, glancing back once before closing the door behind him. The room went quiet, 3 sets of eyes landed on Naruto. He didn't flinch. "So," he said lightly, slipping his hands into his pockets, "what did you want to talk about?" Amethyst was the first to snap. "We know you're the masked man," she blurted, pointing at him like she was throwing a punch. "So just admit it already and stop messing with our lives." Naruto's brow rose, caught off guard more by her bluntness than the accusation itself. He hadn't expected this kind of direct hit so soon, not when his only real contact with them was during fights, and the occasional throw. Right. He did have that habit of testing how far he could toss her. That might have made things personal. He let out a small sheepish laugh, scratching the back of his neck. "Masked man, you lost me." Pearl stepped in before Amethyst could shout again, ever the diplomat. Her posture softened just enough to suggest she wasn't fully sure. "What Amethyst meant," she said, carefully, "is that we've been concerned. There's been a man appearing around Beach City lately, always when we're defending the town. And according to Steven, you showed up around the same time." "Yeah," Amethyst added, pushing forward again. "And don't act innocent. I know you aim for rocks when you throw me." Garnet caught her shoulder and pulled her back gently, still saying nothing, but watching Naruto closely behind her visor. Naruto's smile lingered, calm, easy, but beneath it, his thoughts sharpened like glass. So they really are watching, and they're close enough to start connecting dots. They don't have proof, just timing, patterns. Annoyance, that, I can work with. Naruto leaned back slightly, arms resting casually on the counter, his eyes sweeping over them with the same soft, easy calm he always carried. "So, you think I'm the masked man?" he asked, voice level, almost curious. I get it, timing suspicious, patterns match, but that's all it is, just patterns. Amethyst huffed, crossing her arms. Patterns, he's been messing with us for weeks, taking monsters right under our noses. You popped up at the same time. You're him, admit it. Naruto tilted his head slightly, giving a small, sheepish shrug. Look, I can see why it seems that way. But if I wanted to cause trouble, do you think I'd be running a ramen shop? I'm here. Cleaning counters, serving customers, making sure nothing burns. That doesn't sound like someone with the time, sneaking around and taking monsters, does it? Pearl stepped forward, fingers lightly tapping together. But, he's clever, he could hide in plain sight, we have to be cautious, it's not just you, we will check. Naruto nodded once, slow and calm, sure, being careful makes sense, I'd do the same if I were in your shoes. But here's the thing, you don't have anything on me except timing. Nothing else. I haven't interfered with you or your work, I haven't caused a problem. I'm here to do my job. Amethyst muttered under her breath, clearly annoyed that her accusation wasn't landing. Naruto leaned a little closer, tone softening but still steady. If your goal is to protect the city, the last thing you need is to chase every pattern that looks like trouble. Sometimes, things just line up, that's all this is. Garnet, silent until now, gave a subtle nod, eyes narrowing slightly but her posture relaxing ever so fractionally. Pearl let out a soft sigh, I suppose that makes sense. At least, it gives us no reason to accuse you outright. Naruto allowed himself a faint smile, just enough to ease the tension without gloating. Good, then we can talk, ask questions, but maybe skip the accusations? That'll make it easier for everyone. Amethyst groaned but relented. Arms still crossed. Naruto could feel the shift, subtle but real, their suspicion hadn't vanished, but it had slowed, just enough for him to steer the conversation the way he wanted. Naruto leaned back, letting a small breath out. Okay, that's a little suspicion off me, he thought, eyes calmly scanning the three as they processed his words. Now it's just about keeping it low. Answer the questions without giving away too much, stay cool. Play along until I know I'm clear. He straightened slightly, then eased onto one of the stools in the kitchen, folding his arms lightly on the counter. All right, he said, his voice relaxed, ask away, I've got time. The gems exchanged a quick glance, Amethyst rolling her eyes. Pearl nodding to herself, and Garnet silently observing. Pearl spoke first, her tone polite but precise. Thank you for agreeing, we just want to understand a few things, nothing confrontational. Naruto tilted his head, smiling faintly. No problem, let's hear it. Pearl began with questions about his arrival in Beach City, what brought him there, and how he ended up running the shop. Naruto answered simply and calmly, careful not to reveal more than necessary, his words measured, friendly, and straightforward. Each answer subtly eased the tension in the room. Amethyst, still sitting with arms crossed, gave a soft grunt of acknowledgement. That actually makes sense, she muttered. Her annoyance had faded enough that it was replaced with a reluctant curiosity. By the time Pearl moved on to ask about his routine and how he knew Steven, even Amethyst's posture softened. She uncrossed her arms slightly, leaning forward with a hint of interest. Finally, she spoke, voice slightly sheepish. Okay, sorry for accusing you, you seem cool. And maybe I'll stop by your place sometime for some of that ramen, what Steven called it, right? Naruto chuckled softly, letting the tension fully leave his shoulders. Good, that's the first round done. Now just stay easy, and watch for the next move. His thoughts briefly drifted back to the quiet analytical side, running through everything he knew. Watching for patterns or inconsistencies. Easy answers, calm, measured, nothing to set them off again, just stay chill. Then a sudden yell cut through the room, snapping everyone's attention. You guys! Steven was at the top of the outside stairs, practically bouncing as he called out. Garnet's gaze sharpened, Amethyst immediately tensed and stood, and Pearl's hand went to her chin, thinking. Naruto's calm eyes flicked to the door, senses already alert, picking up on the slight rush of urgency in the air. And just like that, the quiet breaks, he thought, muscles ready, posture easing back into alert but composed. "Guys, the puffer fish monster's back," Steven's voice echoed up the stairs. Full of alarm. Pearl's eyes went wide, ogling, after last time, it's been a bit, shouldn't the masked man have it? She clenched her fists, remembering how the masked man had stolen the creature right out from under them. Naruto's gaze sharpened. "I sent that one off myself, how is it back here?" Before he could step forward, Garnet's voice cut through his thoughts. "Stay inside, Naruto, we've got this." Steven, of course, went with them, already bounding down the porch stairs with that characteristic mixture of excitement and worry. Naruto stayed put, analyzing the scene. Outside, the puffer fish loomed, puffed up to double its normal size, each inhalation a slow, threatening warning. Then, with a sharp exhale, it fired a concentrated blast of air towards Steven. He rolled just in time, narrowly avoiding being knocked off his feet, while Amethyst lunged at the creature, swinging with all her strength. The air blast caught her slightly off balance, pushing her against a rock. Pearl hovered above, precise and cautious, sending a controlled strike toward the monster. Garnet moved closer, her fists glowing faintly as she readied a punch, but every move seemed to provoke a counter from the fish, which sucked in air, puffed, and blasted again. Naruto's brow furrowed. "They're doing well, but this thing's dangerous, Steven's too exposed." He rubbed the gauntlet under his shirt briefly, thinking. "If I go in as the masked man now, they'll notice I've disappeared, too risky." Instead, he focused on Satsuki's gem, just a subtle touch, enough to shift the monster's momentum without making it obvious, using subtle sparks of electric currents. A wave of force tugged slightly at the air around the creature. The puffer fish, confused, veered its blast slightly off target. Steven stumbled but recovered, taking advantage of the opening to dodge closer. Amethyst charged, landing a solid hit to its side, while Pearl's precise strikes kept it off balance. Naruto's small adjustment had given them just enough room to regroup. He sighed softly, half amused and half exasperated. "Still too reckless, kid." As the monster recovered, puffing air in frantic bursts, Naruto stayed hidden, calculating. He could step in fully if needed, but for now, guiding the fight subtly was enough to keep Steven safe while keeping his own cover intact. Without much time passing, Steven stumbled mid-stride, feet catching on the uneven ground. And before he could steady himself, the puffer fish's body inflated like a balloon, its cheeks bulging grotesquely. It sucked in a massive lungful of air, aiming the wide blast directly at the boy. The wind howled, shrill and dangerous. Naruto didn't think, he moved. One instant, he was by the temple. The next, the world folded, and he was standing between Steven and the monster. At the very same moment, another figure blurred into being behind him. The masked man. His black suit rippled in the gust, the right sleeve ripped clean to reveal the gauntlet wrapped tight around his arm. The red and black gems embedded there pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. In his hand, a massive spinning shuriken howled louder than the wind, splitting the blast in two with a metallic shriek. Naruto's projection stood perfectly still, facing Steven with soft eyes, while his real body, the masked man, braced against the blast. The weapon spun like a turbine, splitting the incoming wind in two, forcing it to shear away around them. "Get back," Naruto said, his voice calm, the illusion giving no hint that it wasn't flesh. Steven blinked between the two figures, breath caught in his throat, before nodding quickly. He scrambled back with Naruto, keeping his eyes wide on the masked man's back. From the gem's vantage point, it all happened in a flash, Naruto darting out to shield Steven, and then, like clockwork, the masked man appearing to take the brunt of the attack. To them, it was proof the two weren't the same person. Amethyst's suspicion splintered right then, Pearl's sharp tension softened, and Garnet watched silently, unreadable as always. "Good," Naruto thought from beneath the mask. One more thread cut from the web they're trying to weave. Satsuki's gem pulsed faintly against his skin, feeding that strange calm through him. Spatial control, swap, plasma control, lightning and flames, so far. And that other ability, the one he never fully grasped, chrono sight. It let him see alternate outcomes of time, as well as let him project them. The shuriken vanished into the red gem with a whisper. The pink and black gems flared. In its place, a black stylized metal dragon scythe slid into the masked man's grip. The weapon hummed with weight and power as he stepped forward, calm, methodical. The monster inhaled again. The masked man moved. In one clean, unhurried slash, the scythe ripped through the swirling air and buried itself in the creature's swollen side. A second later, the wind imploded back on itself, the puffer fish shrieking before bursting in a bright poof, its gem dropping onto the sand with a soft clink. The projection of Naruto stood near Steven, hand slightly raised as if to shield him from debris, though it couldn't have touched anything if it tried. That was fast, Amethyst breathed out. Pearl's voice followed, more composed but tinged with relief. Just like before, he appears, handles it, and vanishes. Except, he hadn't vanished yet. Naruto's chest tightened slightly. Normally, he'd disappear the moment the gem hit the ground. But this time, he couldn't, not without shattering the projection standing beside Steven. If both disappeared, the illusion would fall apart and every bit of progress he'd made tonight would vanish with it. So he stood perfectly still behind the mask, feigning caution, buying seconds. The illusion Naruto gently ushered Steven closer to the gems, his voice steady. "Come on kid, you're safe now." Steven followed him without question. Running up the sand toward the others, completely unaware the hand near his shoulder wasn't real. Pearl stepped forward, gaze flicking between Naruto and the masked man. "See," she murmured under her breath, more to herself than anyone else. He was right there, he couldn't have been the same person. Naruto's projection gave a sheepish grin, hands half lifted. "Man, that guy's got good timing, huh?" Amethyst barked out a short laugh. Yeah, I take it back, you're way too slow to be him." Garnet didn't speak, she just looked, not at Naruto, but through him. The masked man, still standing in the clearing, adjusted his stance just enough to give himself an out. The moment their focus drifted fully to Steven and the others. His form blurred at the edges, folding in on itself like fog burning away in sunlight. The projection Naruto tilted his head, like he was watching too, as the masked man vanished cleanly into the air. The wind had only just died down, Steven was still catching his breath beside the projected Naruto. Amethyst was cracking her neck, Pearl straightening her stance. The air smelled faintly of salt, sand, and the sharp tang of the puffer fish's dispersal. That's when Garnet spoke. "Now." The single word snapped through the air like a whip. Before Steven could blink, the three gems lunged forward, weapons materializing in streaks of colored light. Garnet's gauntlets shimmered into place. Amethyst's whip uncoiled with a sharp snap, and Pearl's spear cut through the air with practiced precision. Naruto didn't need to turn to know it was happening. He'd heard Garnet's quiet order before the others even twitched. He could read it in the way her energy spiked, a sudden flare of authority and calculation. So that's how it is. His gaze flicked to the gems embedded in the bandaged gauntlet at his wrist. They pulsed faintly in response, as if feeling the weight of the moment just as much as he did. "Why can't I catch a break?" he thought dryly, exhaling through his nose. The scythe shimmered away in a pulse of red light, returning to Satsuki's gem. The illusion of Naruto standing with Steven didn't flinch. Didn't betray anything, but the real him shifted his weight just slightly, calm and poised. He'd almost forgotten Garnet could talk with how silent she'd been during his whole interrogation. Now here she was, calling the shot, cutting straight through the lull he was hoping to escape through. "They're attacking," Steven's voice cracked behind the illusion. Garnet's voice was cool, grounded, carrying no hesitation. "He hasn't left, that means something's wrong, he has more gems than he showed us before, this is our chance. She wasn't wrong. Normally, the masked man disappeared the second the job was done. But this time, he lingered, and that made her suspicious. The gems moved in coordinated strikes. Garnet closing distance like a truck, Amethyst looping her whip low, Pearl striking high to box him in. This is a problem, Naruto thought, jaw tightening behind the mask. Satsuki's gem pulsed faintly against his skin. She was already strained from maintaining the double, any more and she'd be pushed hard. But dropping the illusion now meant blowing his cover entirely. Sorry Satsuki, he muttered under his breath, just low enough that only the wind could hear. The gems on his gauntlet flared, energy like light trailing up his arm as the masked man slid back in a burst of air, letting Garnet's gauntlet slam into sand. Amethyst's whip lashed forward, he caught it midair, twisting it around his wrist with a dancer's ease, yanking her off balance. Pearl dove in with a clean, elegant thrust, and the masked man spun, letting the scythe reappear mid-motion to parry the spear with a flash of sparks. Meanwhile, Illusion Naruto pulled Steven back. "Stay behind me," it said in a tone that was calm, just the right mix of concern and steadiness. The real Naruto ducked under Garnet's swing, the air pressure alone enough to sting his cheek through the mask. He'd fought enough to know when Garnet wasn't holding back. "They're serious, I can't keep this up too long," he thought, feeling the faint strain pulsing through Satsuki's connection. "If she burns out, both me and my cover are toast." The gems pressed their assault with relentless rhythm. Their teamwork practiced, honed. He'd expected nothing less. This wasn't a simple monster cleanup anymore. This was a hunt. And he was the prey. The moment Amethyst's whip lashed out again, it didn't miss. It cracked through the night air, curling around his ankle in one clean motion. For once, it actually worked. The masked teen jerked mid-step, balance stolen from him as Amethyst yanked hard with both hands, planting her heels into the sand. "Gotcha," she shouted, eyes narrowed. "Garnet's right, why didn't you move away, or at least disappear?" Naruto's heel dug trenches through the sand, the black gem on his gauntlet still glowing faintly as it held the illusion together. He gritted his teeth beneath the mask. "Shit," he muttered under his breath. His eyes flicked down to the 4 jewels glinting against his wrist. 1, 2, 3, yellow. He focused. A yellow glow flared faintly as he ripped a short, golden blade free from the yellow gem, plunging it into the ground. The sword bit deep, anchoring him mid-pull. Amethyst kept tugging, but she wasn't expecting him to shift his weight that fast. A quick pivot and a jerk, and he slipped his leg free from the whip's loop. Before she could recoil, the blade flew from the sand, spinning toward her like a thrown kunai. She flinched, ducking, that was all he needed. Pearl came in the second. Amethyst's attention faltered. Spear drawn in elegant arcs. She didn't go for stabs, not with how human he still looked, but her swings were precise, quick, and constant. Her voice cut between each strike like the steel of her weapon. "Maybe his disappearing has a limit," she said, her eyes sharp as she lunged again. "But that doesn't explain those gems on his gauntlet, or how he kept them hidden." He tilted his head, parried one swing with his forearm, and sidestepped the next, expression hidden but irritation simmering low beneath the mask. "Persistent," he muttered, catching the haft of Pearl's spear mid-swing. Pink light flared on his wrist, Sakura's strength kicking in. Pearl barely had time to register the shift before he twisted, spinning her like a ribbon dancer and hurling her away with a burst of augmented force. She hit the sand and rolled, but she was already moving to recover. Then Garnet was there. She came down like a hammer, gauntlets blazing, each hit sharper and faster than the last. Her blows were too heavy to take head-on, not without burning through power he needed for the illusion. He slipped between her punches by inches, pink light keeping him mobile, fast, fluid. Garnet's voice cut through Pearl's theory like a blade. "It's clear as day, his powers come from the gems on his gauntlet. That's how he disappears, that's why he's stronger than most humans. Man, they just had to be right." Naruto thought bitterly as her fist brushed his mask, a gust of force whipping his hair back. He ducked low, pressed his palm against the sand, and with a pulse of energy, raised an earthen wall to break her rhythm. She didn't even hesitate. Her gauntlets glowed, and she smashed through it like paper. They were relentless. Amethyst struck with her whip again, snapping at his arms and legs. Pearl darted in with surgical precision, spear aiming to hurt him into Garnet's fists. Garnet herself, brute force, fast, unwavering. And through it all, Naruto kept part of his mind tethered to the illusion standing beside Steven, a whip lashed toward his midsection, a spear sliced air beside his ribs. A gauntlet grazed his shoulder. He exhaled sharply, blocking Garnet's punch, catching Pearl's spear in the same motion, ducking Amethyst's whip with a single, controlled turn. And then it happened. The last gem on his wrist, the one that had glowed in the first second of him fighting the puffer fish, flared to life, a hot, pulsing surge of power flooded his veins. Kara's energy. The familiar rush ignited through him like a heartbeat made of fire. He pushed outward. A single burst of strength, raw, controlled, practiced, blew the three gems back several feet, sand spraying from the force. They dug in fast, they'd fought him enough to brace, but he had the moment he needed. Satsuki's gem flickered weakly in her slot, not much time left, they regrouped fast. Garnet tightened her stance, ready for round 2, Amethyst cracked her whip, Pearl adjusted her spear grip. This was the point where he usually left, clean, Foz, gone. But he hadn't. He couldn't. Come on, he thought, I need that opening. He steadied his breathing, let the chaos settle into focus. No panic, no fear, just control, just like he'd promised himself long ago. Naruto straightened, backlit against the ocean's faint shimmer. Through the mask, his eyes burned calm and sharp as a blade. That was actually the best you guys've ever been, he said, voice smooth and dismissive, the tone the masked man was known for. Had me for a sec, he tilted his head slightly, I'll give you one thing, you're right about the gems on my wrist. But you don't know everything. Amethyst barked back, we know you've poofed monsters and turned them into tools. He didn't answer. Garnet stepped forward, steady and unshakable. We won't let you take any more, we know you're planning something. And we'll stop you, if not today, then tomorrow. We'll take those gems from you. And wherever you're keeping the rest, we'll find them. They're dangerous in human hands. She meant every word, that was the thing about Garnet, she never bluffed. Pearl's spear lowered slightly, Amethyst's grin sharpened. They thought they'd cornered him. And that was exactly what he needed. Naruto moved slowly, deliberately, no hostility, no sudden flicker of power, just calm. He knelt, picked up the puffer gem from the sand, and, without a hint of aggression, tossed it to Garnet. She caught it cleanly. Not even a twitch of surprise. That moment, that sliver of attention fixed on her hand, was all it took. The masked man standing in front of them was replaced with the illusion, while the real Naruto slipped back into his civilian clothes, taking the clone's place beside Steven. Satsuki's gem glimmered faintly under his jacket, just enough for one more trick. The illusion spoke, still calm, still sharp. That settles this one. That puts us at 5-1. Your first win. A short pause. But I'll make sure it doesn't happen again. It was too clean, too deliberate, not like him at all, but he needed them to buy it. Till next time, the illusion finished, before its form flickered and faded like a glitch in the air. Satsuki's glow died the second it vanished, the gems stood in silence, their battle stances slowly easing as the wind off the ocean carried the night air between them. Naruto, back in his usual clothes, still wore that faint fake worry on his face, like someone who'd just witnessed something dangerous, but not someone who'd been in it. The mask was gone, the suspicion was, too. For now. The gems lowered their weapons as the dust finally settled. Amethyst was the first to break the silence, letting her whip dissolve away with a snap of her wrist. Well, he finally disappeared, she muttered, still catching her breath. Though, he was kinda off today. Steven tilted his head. Off, how so? I can never tell, I'm never close enough when he's around. Naruto stayed quiet. Yeah, he thought, that's because you're never told to engage when he shows up. A silent thank you to the gems slipped through his head. Garnet crossed her arms. At least we got more information on him this time. She paused, looking directly at Naruto. And, sorry for thinking you were him. Pearl sighed, lowering her spear. Yes, I'm sorry too. Amethyst scratched the back of her neck. Yeah, same. Steven blinked. Wait, you thought Naruto was the masked guy? No way. Naruto wouldn't attack us. Naruto didn't respond, only exhaled quietly through his nose. Hopefully, he thought, Steven never has to find out the truth. He finally spoke, his tone as chill as ever. Doesn't matter to me, I just wanted to clear things up. With that, he turned, shoving his hands in his pockets. I'll see you guys soon, gotta fix up the ramen shop anyway. Steven stretched, letting out a soft groan. Yeah, I'm gonna stay inside the rest of the today. That was way too much excitement for a day off. As he left, the three gems stood together, the weight of the encounter still hanging in the air. Amethyst finally broke the quiet. Well, I guess the ramen guy isn't the masked man after all. Pearl looked to Amethyst. You were the one who suggested it. Yeah, well, I was wrong, Amethyst grumbled. Naruto seems chill, he wouldn't be able to fake that. Yes, Pearl agreed, but that still means we're back at square one, the masked man is still out there. Garnet's visor gleamed slightly as she shook her head. We're not at square one. She spoke evenly, but with certainty. Amethyst and Pearl turned toward her. Then what are we at? We are a few steps ahead, because Naruto is the masked man. Garnet said flatly. Their expressions froze. What? Amethyst exclaimed. How? We saw them in the same place. Garnet's voice stayed steady. Do you remember what my future vision does with the masked man? Amethyst frowned, thinking, yeah, you said you couldn't see him in the future. But what does that have to do with, I can't see Naruto either, Garnet interrupted. Pearl's face tightened, it clicked. Garnet had known since Naruto and Steven first stepped into the temple. But what about what we saw? Pearl asked, searching for a hole in her logic. We all saw them at the same time. Garnet only shrugged, probably one of his abilities. We also know now, his power comes from those 4 gems on his gauntlet. That gives us a way to counter him. Amethyst crossed her arms, all the frustration from before, rushing back in a wave. I can't believe he tricked us like that. Then she glanced at Garnet again. But why didn't you say anything before? I wanted to see who he really was, Garnet said calmly. Pearl looked confused. What does that mean? It was a chance to see exactly who the masked man is, without the mask, Garnet said. I wasn't going to waste it, and after seeing him, really seeing him, she paused. I don't think we should go after him anymore. Both Pearl and Amethyst blinked. I thought after we found out it was him we'd, rip into his shop and take the gems back. Amethyst muttered. Garnet shook her head. He rushed to protect Steven, he hesitated to attack us. Naruto isn't just the mask he puts on, he has lines he won't cross. So, we let him go? Pearl asked. No, Garnet answered, firm. We don't chase him. But if the masked man shows up again, we stop him. We take the gems, then we leave him alone. And above all else, we leave Steven out of it. The other two sighed but accepted Garnet's decision, knowing what kind of impact something like this would have on the kid. But this raises more questions, Pearl added quietly. If he uses those gems to power himself, how is he doing it? And how does he keep them dormant without a bubble? Garnet's gaze softened, we'll figure it out. Naruto stretched his arms on the walk back to his shop, his necklace of 4 gems glinting faintly in the sunlight. The fight had taken more out of him than he wanted to admit. He could already feel Sakura's strength fading from his muscles. They got me good this time, he thought, but nothing I can't handle. He locked the door behind him the moment he stepped inside and released the gems. Satsuki fluttered out first in her raven form, landing weakly in his hands. You alright? Naruto asked quietly. I know that was rough on you. The raven gave a soft, tired caw and nuzzled into his palm. He exhaled slowly in relief. Satsuki was tired but okay. That was what mattered. Sakura appeared next, laying on the counter with the same exhausted energy. She'd borne the brunt of the strength augmentation, so it made sense. Kushina was less tired, having only been used for that blade throw against Amethyst. And Kara, of course, was barely winded, lounging on the couch with her usual lazy grin. Glad you're all fine, he muttered. He let them rest while he fully closed the shop. He had barely sat down when his phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the screen, and his shoulders tensed slightly. He picked it up anyway. Hey, Kakashi. The man's voice was lazy but sharp beneath it. Naruto, how've you been? Mission holding up? Naruto gave the same simple answer as always, it's fine. Kakashi chuckled, if you're not dead, I guess that counts as a success. What do you want? Naruto asked. The agency wants regular updates, every 2 weeks, I'm your point of contact. Easier this way. Also, Kakashi's tone shifted, the subjects you've sent in, they're thrilled upstairs. Say it might help us find a way to keep gems dormant without you babysitting them. Naruto frowned. Speaking of that, I saw the puffer fish gem today, the exact same one I sent you guys. Oh, that, Kakashi said, far too casually. We sent it back, a little test, phase 2 stuff. Don't sweat it. Naruto's eyes narrowed. Phase 2? Yeah, not happening anytime soon, just early prep. We stuck a camera on the gem to watch things up close, good footage, by the way. Naruto's fingers tightened on the phone. Kakashi went on like nothing was wrong. We also figured out how much force it takes to poof that class of gem cleanly. And their weapon strength, that's something you couldn't get out of your little brawls, huh? Naruto's stomach twisted. How do you know about my fights with the gems? I didn't put that in the reports. Kakashi paused for just a moment. You don't need to worry about that. Another beat of silence. Anyway, any other questions? Kakashi asked. Yeah, Naruto muttered. What's this whole watching and grabbing thing about? All they told me was the mission, nothing else. A pause, like the man was considering whether to tell the boy or not, before the air suddenly darkened. Kakashi's voice lowered, dropping from laziness to a serious tone. The higher-ups are planning something, I don't know everything yet. But don't dig this time, Naruto. They're serious. They won't settle for your usual attitude. Oh, and one last thing, you should stop interfering with the subject so much, it will put all of us in a bad spot, especially you, so keep to yourself while you're ahead. Naruto stared at the wall, feeling that old, heavy weight settle in. He paused, thinking to himself, though he wasn't sent on this mission to do so. That all? Yup, for now. Kakashi hung up. Naruto let the phone rest on the table, jaw tight but face unreadable. His mind spun with quiet, controlled rage. Of course they sent it back. He shouldn't have been surprised, the agency never cared about the fallout, he was just their tool, nothing more. Kakashi's casual tone made that clear. His eyes dropped to where the gems sat around him. Warm, familiar, family. Not subjects, not weapons. And if the agency ever came for them, they won't take you from me. His hand clenched. If they try, I'll stop being their tool. He let out a slow breath, the ceiling blurring a little above him. He knew it wasn't that easy. Naruto was stuck between his family and the people giving him orders, juggling masks and lies. And through it all, Steven and the Crystals trio, it was clear those four were a part of this company's plan, though whatever it was, is unknown. It meant the four, and his mission, were more interconnected than he thought, not simple watching, but something else. A mess, he thought, almost laughing. A few days later, afternoon sunlight spilled through the ramen shop's front windows, catching in the steam that rose from the sink. The scent of broth still lingered in the air, heavy and warm. The lunch crowd had left, leaving only Naruto and Steven behind to clean up. The soft clatter of bowls and the slosh of water filled the space between them. Sakura's gem glinted faintly on Naruto's necklace as he scrubbed the counter, the others hidden and silent, resting after the last few days. Steven stood at the sink beside him, sleeves rolled up, face half lost in thought. Naruto could tell he wanted to say something. The kid's lips would part, then close again. Naruto didn't look up at first, just rinsed another bowl. Then, with his usual easy calm, he spoke. "You gonna ask what's on your mind, or are you gonna keep staring at that plate till it confesses?" Steven jumped a little, grinning sheepishly. Right. I was just wondering if you were okay, from the monster attack the other day." Naruto raised a brow. "That puffer fish thing?" "Yeah," Steven said, nodding. "You kinda jumped in front of me when it attacked. I thought maybe you got hurt or something." Naruto didn't answer right away. His hands stilled in the water as his mind drifted, Kakashi's voice echoing from the call, those words about his mission, about silence. He pushed that aside, exhaled softly, and gave Steven a faint grin. "I'm fine, kid, nothing I can't handle." Steven frowned a little, then said, "That's too bad." Naruto tilted his head. "Too bad?" Steven blinked, realizing how that sounded. "Wait, I didn't mean it like that, I just, found out I can heal people now." He looked proud, hands gesturing wildly. "Like, actual healing." "I found out after helping my friend Connie, she's my best friend, I healed her bad eyesight, it was amazing." Naruto leaned against the counter, smirking. "Healed her eyesight, huh? Sounds like something a couple would do." Steven went red immediately. "We're just friends." Naruto chuckled, amused by how fast he backpedaled. But his thoughts turned more focused as he looked at Steven again. He'd always known the kid was half gem, the glow in his gem, the way the others deferred to him, but he hadn't thought much about it beyond that. To him, Steven was just a kid, sweet, clumsy, good-hearted. But maybe that was an oversight. "You wanted to try your power on me?" Naruto asked, drying his hands on a rag. Steven nodded, then hesitated. "A little bit, yeah, but I mostly just wanted to make sure you weren't hurt from that monster. Or the masked man." Naruto's smile softened, quiet and genuine this time. "You really are too kind for your own good, you know that?" Steven laughed awkwardly, rubbing the back of his neck. Naruto's gaze lingered a moment, then his tone shifted, still gentle, but thoughtful. "I never actually asked before, but, what's the deal with your powers, anyway? I don't know much about gems, not really." He was being honest, mostly. What he knew came from fragments, what the agency allowed, what his family once told him. Nothing deep. And the gems didn't share much with outsiders. Still, Naruto's curiosity itched at him. The way Steven fought, the way he glowed, it wasn't just gem energy. It was something else. Steven leaned on the counter, thinking, well, I'm half human, half gem. My gem is my mom's, rose quartz. The gems say my powers are kinda unpredictable because of that. I don't know everything I can do yet, but the ones I've unlocked so far, they're connected to my feelings. Because I'm human too. Naruto nodded slowly, absorbing it. That made sense. Emotional-based power, instinct over training. It explained the inconsistency. Still, it meant there was a lot more potential in the kid than he'd realized. That sounds cool, he said simply, and Steven brightened a little. For a while, the only sound was water running in the sink and the hum of the ceiling fan. Then Steven spoke again, voice quieter, more serious. I want to help the gems more, I can't just sit back when things get tough. So I've been trying to figure out how to use my powers better. And, He looked up at Naruto, hopeful. I was wondering if you could help me train with my gem powers? Naruto blinked, honestly surprised. Me, you sure you don't want to ask one of them? Steven shook his head. They help sometimes, but I think I need to learn in a different way. And you're good at figuring stuff out, you help people. Naruto couldn't help but laugh softly. I make ramen, kid, and the only time you really saw me do something other than that, was that one thug I kicked out my shop. He saw the determination in Steven's eyes, pure and unfiltered, and sighed with a grin. Alright, fine, I'll help, but fair warning, I don't know much about gem powers. Steven nodded. Naruto ruffled his hair. Alright then, let's start with that healing of yours. The two shared a small grin, the room still smelling faintly of broth and soap as the late sun spilled gold across the counter, an easy calm before the next storm. Steven sat cross-legged at the main counter of the ramen shop, chin propped on his palms, watching Naruto with curious eyes. The late sunlight cut across the wood counter, glinting off clean dishes and the faint sheen of broth still lingering in the air. Naruto came out from the kitchen holding something dripping wet, then slapped it down right in front of Steven with a dull, meaty smack. Steven blinked. A fish? Naruto crossed his arms, looking entirely too casual. Yep. What, are we doing with it? Steven asked, eyeing the fish like it might suddenly start talking. Naruto leaned back, resting his elbows on the counter, that easy grin never leaving. Training. Training, Steven repeated slowly. With a fish. Naruto nodded like it was the most normal thing in the world. If you're gonna heal something, you need something to heal. So, I caught you a fresh fish, think of it as your first patient. Steven frowned at the motionless creature. It seems pretty dead. Naruto exhaled through his nose, rubbing the bridge of it with 2 fingers. It seems that way, he said calmly, as if explaining something obvious. Besides, it's just a test. Either heal it, or keep it alive before it suffocates, simple. Steven stared at him, mouth slightly open. Simple. Naruto just smiled lazily, clearly not planning to elaborate. After a second, Steven sighed, trusting him like he always did. Okay, here goes nothing. He licked his palm, pressed his glowing, slightly sparkling spit onto the fish, and gave it a light slap. Naruto leaned forward a little, watching. There was a shimmer where Steven's saliva touched the scales, a faint golden-pink dusting that spread outward like sunlight underwater. It seeped through the fish's skin, and for a few long seconds, nothing happened. Then, flop. The fish twitched, another twitch, and then it started flopping around with sudden life, gasping weakly but very much alive. Steven's face lit up. I did it. Naruto blinked, eyes widening slightly. Yeah, you did. Steven looked at the fish flop for a second, then screamed out loud, I got to get it to some water. Naruto stopped Steven, then placed a bowl of water on the counter. The pink gem on Naruto's necklace gave a subtle, reactive glow, Sakura's gem responding instinctively to the energy. Naruto's gaze flicked toward it, thoughtful. The resemblance was uncanny. Sakura's healing channeled pure restorative energy, knitting wounds, mending bone, restarting the body itself. But Steven's, his power didn't just repair. It breathed life back in. It was more primal, more ethereal. Like something beyond the limits of what even she could manage. He kept his tone light, but inwardly he was running the comparison in quiet awe. Sakura could hold on to life, Steven returned it. The fish wiggled once more before Naruto gently set it in the bowl. He looked at Steven again. Still impressed. Nice work, kid, didn't think you'd pull it off that fast. Steven grinned from ear to ear, proud. Naruto leaned his cheek into one hand, still thinking. That kind of ability, if he ever learned control, even the agency would take notice. He pushed the thought away before it could bother him further. Alright, Naruto said finally, nodding toward the counter. You've proven you can bring a fish back from the brink of death, what else you got? Steven's face scrunched into a thinking pose, elbows on the counter, fingers steepled under his chin, making an exaggerated sound. Naruto blinked, mildly amused. Don't tell me you have to think that hard about it. Steven didn't answer right away, still humming dramatically. Naruto sighed with a smirk, shaking his head. How many powers does this kid even have? He wondered, half exasperated, half curious. Because for the first time since he'd met Steven, Naruto was beginning to realize the boy wasn't just half gem. There was something deeper stirring under that cheerful grin, something powerful enough to make even him cautious. Naruto leaned against the ramen stand counter, watching Steven's face light up as they moved from one ability to the next. It was almost hard to keep up with the kid. One second he was bubbling objects the size of a wagon wheel, the next he was talking about turning into cats. For what Steven called all he could do, he sure had a lot going for him. He could make bubbles, some small enough to trap a single object, others large enough to bounce around in like a hamster ball. Naruto tested their durability, tapping his knuckles against the bubble walls and finding them tough enough to block a solid hit. They even moved with surprising control, though when Naruto suggested trying to reshape them, Steven only managed a few wobbly dents before the sphere snapped back into place. Not a failure, but definitely a start. Then there was the healing. Naruto still couldn't get that fish out of his mind, how something lifeless could suddenly thrash back into motion under Steven's hand. They tested it again, this time with varying conditions, seeing just how far that life-bringing touch could go. Steven's healing was real, but it had its limits. Too much damage, too little life left, and nothing happened. Still, it wasn't like any healing ability Naruto had ever seen. It wasn't repairing, it was reviving. The kind of power that made you think twice about what was possible. When Steven mentioned his mother's tears could heal, Naruto quietly tucked that away. Maybe emotions were a key, the heart behind the ability. That made sense, in its own strange way. But when they moved on to the shield, things hit a wall. Steven couldn't summon it, no matter how hard he tried. Naruto offered tips here and there, subtle tricks from what he'd learned about gem weapons, but nothing took. Steven's powers didn't follow the same rhythm as the corrupted gems Naruto was connected to. They flowed differently, almost like they had their own pulse. Then came shape-shifting. That one was something else. Steven showed him cat fingers. Naruto had to admit, the story alone made his skin crawl. Watching Steven's expression while he talked about it, the mixture of embarrassment and mild horror, Naruto could tell it hadn't been a fun experience. The ability itself was wild, not just a change in form, but in color, texture, and, disturbingly, intent. It wasn't the controlled kind of shape-shifting Naruto knew gems were capable of. It felt chaotic, like something that tried to be alive. Maybe that was the human part of Steven's biology interfering, trying to imitate life instead of mimicking it. By the end of the day, the two sat on the roof of the ramen shop, bowls in hand. The orange-pink sky stretched out above them, the last of the sunlight washing over Beach City. Naruto slurped his noodles lazily while Steven, sitting cross-legged, stared out toward the horizon, looking content and tired in the same breath. The kid had surprised him, really surprised him. Naruto couldn't help but admit it, he'd underestimated Steven. He'd thought the boy was just curious and big-hearted, tagging along with the gems. Protected and sheltered from the real dangers out there. But now, seeing him use that kind of power and determination to get better, Naruto knew better. He rested his chopsticks on the bowl and exhaled, eyes narrowing at the sunset. Steven wasn't just some kid. And that realization left Naruto thinking dangerous thoughts. If he trusted Steven, told him the truth about why he was here, about the company, maybe he could find some clarity, or even help. But then again, dragging Steven into that mess felt wrong. The boy had enough weight on his shoulders already. So Naruto leaned back, arms behind his head, and forced a smirk. For now, he'd keep that line between them. At least until he figured out what kind of person Steven really wanted to be. Steven broke Naruto's thoughts with a small, almost sheepish voice. "Hey, Thanks for helping me today, even if we didn't really train my powers, it was really fun. Naruto tilted his head, half grinning. No problem, kid, though I don't know if I really helped all that much. Steven frowned, leaning forward over his empty bowl. What, you were totally helpful, you think about stuff so calmly. You'd probably come up with, like, a bunch of cool ways I could use my powers. I mean, you did figure out that fish thing. That earned him a quiet chuckle from Naruto, guess so. Yeah, Steven said, his tone softer now. He hesitated, then glanced over at Naruto, watching the faint glint of his eyes in the dark. Hey, back when the masked guy showed up, the guy who blocked the pufferfish, you were in front of me so you didn't see him, did you? Naruto didn't flinch, but something in his posture stilled. Yeah, he replied evenly. Though, it's hard to forget someone like that. Steven nodded, gaze drifting back to the stars. Yeah, it's just, when I saw you two together, for a second, it felt like you were the same person. Naruto turned slightly, his expression unreadable in the half-light. That so? Steven shrugged quickly, trying to play it off. Maybe I was just seeing things. I was kinda dizzy, you know? Lot going on. Naruto nodded once. The two sat in silence for a while after that, the waves breaking softly against the shore. The stars unmoving above. And though Naruto looked calm, Steven's eyes flicked toward him once more, quiet curiosity burning behind them. Then he smiled, thanks again, then he hesitated. Maybe next time you can help again. You know, when I figure out another power, my big brother can help me figure it out. Naruto blinked, caught off guard, the words echoed in his head, big brother. He mouthed them once, like he was trying the phrase on for size, before laughing under his breath. Sure, he said finally, with a warm grin. Your big brother can always help you with this gem thing, and keep you safe. Steven beamed, resting his chin on his knees, eyes glowing in the amber light of sunset. Naruto leaned back again, smiling faintly as the sound of waves rolled in below them. For the first time in a long while, the quiet felt nice. And maybe, just maybe, he didn't mind the idea of having someone call him that. That's it for today. I hoped you liked the video. Please like and subscribe, and comment ideas if you can, and maybe you could share this with your friends, because you never know, they might like what ifs too. So without further ado, All Kage, out.